The box wasn't supposed to be heavy. It was just plastic, a forgotten auction lot. But when David pried it open in his garage, the silence that followed was too loud to ignore. Inside, wrapped in a cracked evidence bag, was a police-issued Bodycam. Still charged. Still blinking. A red dot, steady. He didn't know it yet, but something inside had waited to be seen. On his laptop, he connected the device. The screen flashed once. Then, a file opened. There was no warning. No introduction. Just a room. Dim, bare, cold. And a voice, trembling, off camera. A man said, "I didn't mean to. She just wouldn't stop screaming." David froze. The voice wasn't panicked. It was deliberate. Measured. Like someone rehearsing remorse. Static crackled. Then a groan. The camera tilted wildly, catching a pale hand dragging something across the floor. David slammed the laptop shut. But the sound had already gotten in. It was the kind of confession that didn't belong to this world. Something twisted had been caught in the open, then buried. Until now. And David had unearthed it. David didn't sleep that night. He just sat in the dark with the laptop in front of him, like it was a loaded gun. The voice kept replaying in his head. Not the words, but the tone. Hollow, away. Almost rehearsed. He couldn't stop wondering. Who was the man? And who was she? When dawn broke, he replayed the clip. Frame by frame. Freeze. Rewind. Freeze again. Then he noticed it. A badge on the floor, half buried in shadow. He zoomed in. Numbers. A department name. His throat tightened. It was real. Not a hoax, not some ARG. He opened the side of the Bodycam and checked the internal memory. Several files. Some were corrupted. Some were encrypted. But 5 were playable. He hovered over the first one again. His hand shook. His cursor stayed still. Something told him once he hit play, nothing in his life would go back to the way it was. But he clicked anyway. The second clip began with a door opening. A hallway stretched out. Long, sterile, institutional. The walls were beige and peeling. There was no ambient noise, only the sound of footsteps. Heavy boots. The camera panned right. A mirror caught the reflection of a man in uniform. His badge matched the one from the first clip. Officer D. Heller, Dart. Late 30s. Buzzcut, .ite. Blank stare. He wasn't responding to a call. He was already inside. As he moved deeper into the hallway, a muffled voice called out. Female. Frightened. Please. I did what you said. He didn't reply. His steps didn't slow. His silence was louder than the begging. David leaned closer to the screen. The timestamp was from 3 years ago. This wasn't some random footage, it was a moment buried under time. And someone had tried very hard to keep it buried. The sound grew sharper. Every breath. Every creak. The woman's voice came again. I kept quiet. You said that was enough. Her desperation was thin and breaking. Heller turned a corner and faced a door. No number. Just scratches. He reached out and opened it slowly. What David saw next made his heart cave in. The room was a cage. Concrete floor. One chair. Dried blood staining the wall. And her, young, mid-20s, black woman chained by one ankle. She blinked at the light. Her eyes didn't plead. They were past that. They just stared. She whispered, "Is it over?" Heller didn't speak. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. David closed the file. He couldn't breathe. His hands were ice. He stared at his own reflection in the dark screen, haunted by a face he couldn't unsee. It wasn't the woman. It was the officer. Heller. Calm. Void of conflict. The kind of silence you don't survive. Whoever she was, she had been locked away for a reason, hidden by a man meant to protect her. David sat back, numb-thought. The body cam still blinked, waiting to be watched again. But he knew something now. He hadn't bought an object. He had inherited a responsibility. This wasn't lost footage. It was evidence, and someone had left it behind, hoping no one would ever find it. The house felt different now. Even in daylight, shadows clung to corners like secrets too tired to hide. David wandered room to room, not looking for anything, just moving, trying to outrun the voice still echoing in his mind. The coffee went cold in his hand. The chair creaked beneath him like it too was tired. He hadn't turned on the news. He hadn't checked his phone. He hadn't spoken to anyone. Silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Across the room stood a photo on a dusty mantel. A woman, mid-50s. Strong jawline. Sad eyes. She was once someone's mother. Someone's missing mother. David stared at her. The resemblance to the chained woman from the video was unmistakable. Not in features, but in grief. She's been gone 3 years. The frame's worn inscription read. He hadn't noticed it before. Maybe he wasn't meant to. Maybe someone had placed it there on purpose. The picture didn't cry for help. It accused. It asked, why now? But David had no answer. The picture haunted him. He Googled her name from the frame. Angela Morris. Missing since 2022. Last seen outside a county courthouse. No leads. No footage. No suspects. But David had something none of them had. A face and a voice. He scrolled deeper. An old article. Interview with a son. Name, Marcus Morris. 19 at the time. She didn't run. Someone took her, he had said. Then the news cycle moved on. The case faded. But David kept clicking, chasing breadcrumbs. Marcus never gave up. He posted weekly updates. Most were ignored. A thread titled, "My Mom's Alive." I know it. The last update was from 6 months ago. If you find anything, please don't stay quiet. It wasn't a plea. It was a dare. David leaned back. He hadn't known her. He didn't know Marcus. But now, their grief sat in his hands. Unshakable. Uninvited. The world had stopped listening. But David had seen what they hadn't. And he couldn't look away. Marcus lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a pawn shop in the East District. David parked across the street and just sat there, watching, wondering what he would even say. How do you tell someone their mother was never lost, just erased? He watched a young black man, now early 20s, step out onto the porch. Slim build, sharp eyes, face etched by years he never asked for. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, but his stare was still, controlled. David got out and approached. "Marcus?" he asked. The man turned. "Yeah?" David's voice almost broke. "I think I found something of yours." He held out the body cam like it was radioactive. Marcus didn't move. Didn't speak. But his jaw tightened. He didn't need an explanation. Not yet. Grief recognizes its own. Inside Marcus' apartment, the air was thin with dust and stale coffee. A shrine covered a corner wall. Flyers, photos, candles, string connecting timelines. David's eyes scanned it all, each piece louder than words. Marcus didn't ask who David was. He only asked, "Why you?" David said, "It showed up. I didn't go looking." Marcus nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "She never got justice. No one even believed me." His voice cracked, then steadied. "I just want to know what happened." David opened the laptop. The body cam file played again. Marcus stared in silence, his face unreadable. When the woman appeared, he didn't flinch. Didn't blink. He just said, "That's her." His voice didn't waver. "That's my mom." The footage kept playing, but neither of them moved. Truth had arrived. Not as relief, but as a wound. When the video ended, the room didn't breathe. Marcus finally stood, walked to the wall, and pulled down a photograph. She was a nurse, worked night shifts, never missed a birthday. His fingers trembled as he held the frame. They called her unstable, said maybe she left. He laughed once. Try, broken. She used to hum this song. I haven't heard it since. David said nothing. There was nothing to say. Marcus turned to him. You're not a cop. You don't owe her anything. David nodded. I know. Marcus stepped closer. But you saw her. David met his gaze. Yes. That was enough. Not for closure, but for the first step toward it. In that room, between two men bound by discovery, a promise formed, wordless, raw, real. They wouldn't let her disappear again. David knew there were more files. The corrupted ones. The encrypted ones. He didn't want to open them, but he had to. With Marcus beside him, silence was their agreement. File 3 loaded. Static. Dash. Then screaming. The camera was shaking, as if the officer wearing it was running. Breathless. Sharp turns down narrow corridors. Muffled shouting echoed. It wasn't Angela's voice this time. It was another woman. Younger. Don't touch me, she cried. David gripped the laptop. The timestamp was newer. Only a year old. Heller was still active then. Still hiding people. Still collecting them? Marcus muttered, there's more. It wasn't a question. David didn't answer. He couldn't. Because what they were watching wasn't an isolated crime. It was a pattern. A system. A ritual of silence behind a badge. What was this place? And how many had been there before? David paused the video. The hallway was familiar. Not from life, but from a map. He remembered the newspaper articles about the abandoned municipal building downtown, closed after budget cuts, never demolished. He pulled it up online. Side by side, the match was exact. Marcus looked at the screen and said, they used to do bookings there, basement level. David whispered, that's where they took them. They didn't wait. The sun hadn't set yet, but the building would be empty. The world was still pretending everything was normal. Marcus grabbed a flashlight. David pocketed the Bodycam. Neither said out loud what they feared, that they wouldn't be alone down there. Or worse, they would be. The air inside was different. Stale, metallic, damp, tight. Each step echoed like a warning. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips. Doors hung crooked. Broken clocks blinked nonsense. David's flashlight flickered as they descended the narrow staircase. Basement level. The tiles were the same as the Bodycam footage. Same scuffs. Same bloodstains. Marcus stepped forward, scanning the hallway. She was here, he whispered. It wasn't a guess. It was certainty. A door at the end stood ajar. Light spilled from inside, not electric, but candlelight. Someone had been there. Recently. David's throat closed. If they opened that door, they'd either find a piece of the past, or something that had never left. Marcus pushed the door slowly. It groaned like it was in pain. Inside, the room was small. Stone walls, concrete floor, no windows. A single chair. Hot. Empty. Empty. Chains on the wall. Melted candles everywhere. But no one. Just absence, loud and suffocating. On the floor lay a torn hospital bracelet. Faded text. Subject #7. David stepped back. They numbered them, he said, voice thin. Marcus picked up a notebook from the corner. Pages of names. First names. Nicknames. One underlined in red. Angela talked to. Next to it, disposed 721. Marcus dropped the book like it burned. He backed away, eyes hollow. David said nothing. Grief had no words in a room like this. Only questions. and walls too full of answers. They left without speaking. The streets outside didn't feel real. People walked by. Cars moved. But something had changed. Not out there, in them. Marcus clutched the notebook against his chest like it held her heartbeat. David couldn't feel his hands. He just walked. The building behind them stood quiet, as if it had never screamed. As if it hadn't swallowed people whole. As if it hadn't taught men in uniform how to disappear the truth. Marcus stopped at the crosswalk. They killed her, he said. Not to David. Not to anyone. Just aloud. Like he had to say it to breathe. David finally spoke. Not just her. Marcus nodded, eyes red but dry. Then we make them hear us. David didn't know how. But he nodded too. Because there was no going back now. The fourth bodycam file opened with silence. A different angle this time, not the officer's chest, but from a mounted surveillance camera. The footage was darker, grainer, older. A woman sat in the center of the frame, face obscured. Still. A man entered the room. His shadow stretched long across the floor. When he spoke, David paused the video. Because the voice wasn't Heller's. It was deeper, slower, and familiar. Noljungteng. Marcus leaned in. That's not him. The man in the video said, she was never missing. The woman turned toward the camera, revealing Angela's face, alive, terrified, confused. The voice continued. She chose this. Don't forget that when they come asking. David's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about one rogue officer. This was sanctioned, scripted, controlled. They framed her disappearance, Marcus whispered. But David shook his head. No, they made it. This was a performance, planned, recorded, buried, and now unearthed. David scrubbed through the footage. At the end, a close-up showed the suited man speaking directly to camera. This is Officer Lang. File for internal use only. All parties compliant. Marcus gasped. Lang. That's Captain Lang. He was in charge of missing persons. David stared blankly. This wasn't some fringe conspiracy. It had roots. Rank. Authority. Lang hadn't just covered it up. He helped orchestrate it. David searched Lang's name. Still active, promoted, commended. Public hero. A private monster. The system had rewarded him for silence, for obedience. And Angela wasn't the only one caught in his game. The folder labeled Disposition Reports was filled with clips, photos, statements, all carefully worded. Sanitized horror. Marcus whispered, they wrote her out of existence. David whispered back, and no one stopped them. David couldn't sleep. The image of Lang's face haunted every blink. In the quiet of night, he opened the corrupted fifth file. A glitchy intro. Audio skipped. Then, a floor plan. A list of names. Security access points. It wasn't a video, it was a blueprint. Underground structure. Labeled Holding Bay, Secondary. Next to it, a digital note. Subjects #5 through #9. Transferred, not terminated. Marcus leaned over. Transferred? He asked. But David was already scrolling. There was no address, just coordinates. He ran them. A stretch of woods, 2 hours north. No roads. No markers. Just forest. David whispered, they're not dead. Marcus's eyes widened. You think she's alive? David didn't answer. He didn't have to. Hope, sharp and fragile, had already entered the room. They left before dawn. No plan, just purpose. The woods stretched for miles. Silent, damp, endless. The GPS stopped working half an hour before they reached the drop point. A clearing marked by nothing. But Marcus felt it. This is it, he said. David nodded. Trees bent unnaturally near the center. The ground was disturbed. A square metal hatch, rusted but intact, lay beneath leaves. David brushed the dirt aside. His hands trembled. The hatch creaked when opened. A staircase descended into blackness. The same kind as before. The same kind Angela had been dragged through. They built another place, Marcus said, voice hollow. David clicked on his flashlight. No, he replied. They never left. They climbed down. The air was colder than before. Deader. Each step deeper felt like stepping into a past that refused to die. The staircase ended in silence. No guards. No sound. Just a tunnel. Lights buzzed faintly, powered by something still alive. David raised the Bodycam, recording now. Marcus held the notebook like a shield. They passed cell doors. Empty. Some sealed. Some opened. A noise stopped them. Soft. Slow. Rhythmic. Breathing. Behind a thick door labeled, "Holding." David placed his ear against it. A woman's voice, hoarse but steady, sang an old hymn. Marcus gasped. That's her song. David looked at him. Angela? The voice continued. The truth stood on the other side, breathing, waiting. And they had found her. She was never missing. She was hidden. On purpose. David turned the handle. The door groaned, resisting like it knew what lay behind shouldn't be seen. The room was wide, low ceiling, no windows, flickering yellow lights. At the center sat Angela. Thinner. Younger. Older. But alive. Her hands trembled in her lap, fingers clasped tight. She looked up. Eyes met Marcus. For a second, no one breathed. Then she whispered, "Baby." Marcus didn't move. His legs failed him. He dropped to his knees. "Mom? Mine." His voice cracked open. Angela stood slowly, cautiously, like every movement had once been punished. She reached him. They collided, messy, silent, shaking. David stepped back. Some reunions come like rain. This one came like a flood, after a drought. She didn't ask how he found her. He didn't ask what they'd done to her. There would be time for that later. Or maybe there wouldn't. But in that moment, the silence broke, and that was enough to begin the storm. They moved quickly. Angela was weak, but walking. Marcus held her steady while David scanned each corridor with the flashlight. The tunnels groaned like something waking. They passed rooms, empty now, but scarred by what had once lived inside them. Suddenly, voices. From above. Radio chatter. Footsteps. David whispered, "They know." They ducked into a side corridor. Angela's breath rattled. Marcus pressed her close. David peeked around the corner. Two men. Uniformed. Armed. Not cops, private security. Lang didn't trust the law anymore. He controlled his own. The footsteps passed. David turned to Marcus. "We have to move now." Marcus nodded. He lifted his mother. No hesitation. They weren't just running from a place. They were running from the kind of silence that kills. And they were almost out. The stairwell was just ahead. The exit hatch was open. Dawn light poured in from above like a promise. But then, freeze. Lang's voice. Calm. Cold. Calculated. He stepped into view, gun raised. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. David stood in front of Angela. "Name will buy or ball. D. We know exactly what we're doing." Lang shook his head. "You're undoing years of control. People will panic. They'll riot. They'll destroy what they don't understand." Marcus snarled, "They'll finally see what you are." Lang raised his voice. "She wasn't supposed to survive." Angela stepped forward. "But I did." Lang's hand trembled. Just for a moment. That's when Marcus threw the flashlight. It struck the wall. Distraction. David lunged. The gun fired. Echoed. Silence. Then, Lang collapsed. Lang was bleeding. Shoulder hit. He groaned, not in pain, but in defeat. "It doesn't matter," he hissed. "There's always another door. Another place." Marcus knelt beside him, eyes burning. "You don't get to vanish again." David found the body cam on the ground, still recording. He leaned in, steady voice. "Tell them what you did." Lang chuckled, bloody teeth glinting. "They won't believe you. They never do." Angela stood over him. "No," she said, calm. "But they'll believe me." For the first time, Lang's face cracked. He saw it. His silence was broken. David lifted the camera. "This goes everywhere." Angela nodded. "Let it." And with that, they climbed the stairs, leaving Lang beneath the weight of everything he buried. Outside, morning stretched across the trees. The light didn't feel safe. It felt raw. Honest. Angela shielded her eyes. The sky had changed in her absence. Marcus wrapped his arm around her. David exhaled. The body cam still blinked in his hand. He turned to Angela. "Are you ready?" She stared at the horizon. "No," she said. "But I'm not hiding." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd survived. They walked slowly back to the car, 3 shadows long across the dirt. They hadn't won. They hadn't fixed anything. But the truth was breathing again, and that meant someone, somewhere, would finally have to listen. As they drove off, the forest watched them go. Quiet, peace, but not asleep. The press conference wasn't dramatic. No cameras were shoved. No gasps echoed. Just cold microphones and warm lies dressed as answers. The police chief stood stiff behind the podium. "An internal investigation is underway," she said. "We take all claims seriously." But she never said Lang's name. "Never," said Angela's. David stood in the back, camera in hand, recording it all. Angela wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Her truth had already been spoken, in images, in video, in scars. Marcus watched the reporters scribble, most half listening, already shaping the story they wanted. One young woman, mid-20s, held a phone. The body cam footage played silently on her screen. She looked up, eyes sharp. Maybe she'd be the one who didn't look away. Because most people had. And that's how monsters like Lang survived. Not through strength, but through collective, complicit silence. Angela sat in the guest room of Marcus's apartment, curtains drawn, soft light drifting across the floor. She didn't speak much, but she hummed, the same quiet melody Marcus remembered from childhood. A nurse visited daily, but Angela didn't like strangers yet. Her world had been one of doors and restraints, not kindness. Still, she moved with grace. Not the grace of recovery, but of survival. Marcus brought her tea, watched her eyes follow the steam. "You don't have to talk," he said. She touched his hand. "I remember everything," she whispered. He nodded. "When you're ready." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was sacred. It was the sound of something trying to heal. Lang was officially under investigation, but no charges had been filed. David watched him leave the courthouse surrounded by officers. He wasn't in cuffs. He wasn't even angry. He was confident. Smirking. Reporters shouted questions. He waved like a politician, not a predator. "We did what had to be done," he told them. David's grip tightened around the camera. The footage had gone viral. But the system didn't bend easily. Truth didn't always break doors. It chipped away slowly. Lang turned and locked eyes with David for a second. No fear. Just recognition. "Hannah." And David realized something. Lang had never been afraid of being caught. He was only afraid of not being believed. And now, someone believed. The body cam sat on David's desk, blinking faintly like it still had something to say. He hadn't turned it on since that night. Part of him didn't want to. Part of him wondered if it had done enough. He uploaded everything, footage, files, records, onto a secure server and sent it to every reporter, lawyer, and activist who might care. Then he locked the Bodycam in a drawer. Not out of fear, but because he knew the fight wasn't technological anymore. It was human. Messy. Datar. Uncontrolled. Marcus called sometimes. Angela never did. But that was okay. She had nothing left to prove. David sat back, staring at the drawer. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel safe. But he felt something truer than both, responsible. Angela visited the graveyard once. Not for a grave. There wasn't one. But a marker had been placed. Angela Morris, found, survived. She stood before it, wind rustling her coat. Marcus stayed back, letting her have the moment. She knelt, touched the plaque. "They tried to erase me," she said softly. "They failed." Her voice didn't tremble. Her shoulders didn't bend. She stood again, tall and quiet. The dead didn't scare her anymore. The living did. And she would not be silent for them. The sun broke through the clouds as she walked away. A simple step. But after years in chains, it was everything. Her name was no longer missing. It was remembered. The Bodycam played one final file. David hadn't meant to open it. His finger brushed the touchpad, and it began. There was no video this time, just audio. A room tone. Then Heller's voice, low and shaking. "They told me to hold her. I did. But it got worse." Static. A chair scraping. Then another voice, Lang's. "She asked to be forgotten. We're giving her what she wanted." Then a third voice. One David hadn't heard before. Female. Dot. Cold. Dull. "No, you're giving yourselves what you needed." The recording clicked off. David leaned back. His chest was tight. That third voice didn't sound scared. It sounded like someone who saw everything and chose to walk away anyway. Somewhere along the line it wasn't just a cover-up. It was a pact. A system of quiet agreements, each one buying time. But time had run out. The truth wasn't waiting anymore. It had already spoken. The question now was, who would listen? Marcus sat with a notepad in his lap. For the first time in years he was writing, not about loss, but about survival. The kind that didn't come with answers, just endurance. Angela sat nearby, silent, listening to the clock tick. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was forward. "What if people still don't believe us?" Marcus asked. Angela didn't look up. "Then we keep speaking." He nodded. "Even if they ignore us?" Angela's voice was firm. "Especially if they do." Her words weren't meant to inspire. They were instructions. A map through a world that had forgotten how to hear. Outside the window, people moved on. Lives returned to normal. But inside that apartment, truth lived loudly, even if the world stayed quiet. David uploaded the final folder, every file, every frame, to a public archive. No paywall. No password. No edits. He didn't watch the views rise. He didn't wait for feedback. He wasn't chasing justice anymore. He was preserving memory. Evidence outlasts outrage. And silence only wins if it stays unbroken. A comment appeared beneath the first video. "I think I saw her once, years ago. I didn't do anything." Then, another. "This happened to my aunt. No one believed her either." Then dozens more. A pattern emerging from the static. David closed his laptop. Not because it was over, but because it had finally started. People were remembering. People were connecting. The darkness wasn't gone, but it was no longer alone. Angela stood in front of a mirror, holding her old nursing badge. Faded. Bent. Dant. But hers. Her reflection didn't smile. It didn't need to. It existed. It had survived. Behind her, Marcus watched. "You gonna keep it?" he asked. She nodded. "It's the only proof I was ever real." Marcus approached. "You were always real." Angela placed the badge on the table. "Not to them." She touched the mirror. Her fingers trembled, then stilled. "But now, they'll never be able to pretend again." Her voice wasn't bitter. It was carved from something deeper. Certainty. She stepped away from the mirror, left her reflection behind. She didn't need it anymore. She was no longer a missing person. She was the proof. Months later, a child found a camera in a park, just lying there, red light blinking. The boy brought it home. His mother uploaded the contents, expecting junk. But when the file opened, a woman's voice spoke. Hoarse, soft, resolved. She was right there, we all saw. The footage played again and again, until someone new heard it. Then, someone else. The cycle was no longer silence. It was story. A truth passed not through institutions, but through people. People who chose to carry it. The camera didn't record violence now. It recorded testimony. And every time someone listened, a piece of the lie cracked apart. It didn't end with justice. It ended with knowing. Knowing what was lost, what was taken, and what refused to stay buried.